All right. Welcome, everyone. Once again, I'm Romy Newman. I'm the co-founder of Fairy God Boss, and I'm so happy to be here with you all today to talk about ways talent leaders can set and reach diversity recruiting goals. We have this really amazing group of practitioners here to talk to us about this. But before we hand it over to them and hear their perspective, just to set the landscape for you all, we founded Fairy God Boss about 5 years ago. We're the largest career community for women. And I tell everyone that when we founded Fairy God Boss, oops, somebody raised their hand and I wonder if everything's okay. Mara, are you raising your hand because there's a problem? Let's see. Mara, because it's my team member. Mara, I gave you the ability to talk. Is everything good?
All good. Sorry, Gromy.
Oh, okay, good. We're good. All right. So when we founded Fairy God Boss, I used to say, okay, we're creating a community, a career community for women. And we went to introduce it to companies, to investors, to people, and they said, why would women need their own career community? And 5 years later, the landscape has changed so much. And instead of asking why would women need their own career community, what we're hearing from many, many companies, including companies like yours, is that we company have very specific goals to improve diversity in different kinds, in different ways of diversity, whether it's gender diversity, racial diversity, sexual orientation diversity. We have goals, right? So the world has gone from why would we even do this to now we have goals, how do we execute them? And that's what I'm excited to talk to you all about today. So I am going to hand it over. I'm going to start with Margot and ask you each just to quickly introduce yourself, talk about what you do, where you work. So Margot, please take it away.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Romy. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I am Margot Goodson. I'm Vice President, Head of North America Diversity and Inclusion for SAP. And we are on a mission to make D&I our DNA at SAP. And we tie it to our organizational goals as it relates to metrics, philosophy, helping the world run better and improve people's lives internally and externally, so that it's not a performative aspect, but that it truly is strategy and tied foundationally to the talent attraction cycle, to the retention, to the career development advancement, and in our supplier and customer ecosystem. So happy to be here today to talk with you about this information and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. And where are you calling from today?
I am in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, so not too far from our North America headquarters in Newtown Square, PA for SAP.
Wonderful. But working from home still?
Working from home still. Haven't seen the inside of the office since January 2020. Had traveled quite a bit. It was remote by choice, thinking I could go in the office in March, and then came the lockdown. So we're still in this mode.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to rotate to Nigel. Nigel, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Romy, and nice to be on the panel today. My name is Nigel Williams. I have the privilege of leading talent acquisition for Moody's Corporation. I've been in my seat, I guess, about 18 months now. So relatively new to Moody's, not new to talent acquisition. I've been probably different aspects of recruiting for about 20 years now, with a focus in the hospitality industry, and then moved into financial services probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. So absolutely love what I do. I get to work with some amazing people, and I love that, for TA, we get to solve the problems for the organization. And obviously key focus is how we're going to be a more diverse, inclusive, and welcoming company for all different types of talent. So thrilled to be here. I'm based in New York City, despite the British accent, and very excited to be part of the event today.
Thank you. Alicia, Alicia, over to you.
Okay, no problem. Thanks, Romy. And thanks as well to Fairy God Boss for having me today to speak on this topic. So enjoy being able to share the good work that we do here at Semiconductor. And Semiconductor is a global company providing semiconductor-based solutions for energy-efficient type innovations. We employ 34,000 employees worldwide. About annual revenue of about $5 billion is what we generate. And in my space, what I do with the company actually has been the one and only company I've worked for my entire career. I'm not going to date myself, but over 20 years, I've been at the company. I've worked, my background is engineering. So I started off in product engineering. I've worked in operations, worked with quality, cost, control, things of that nature. And then about 4 years ago, I said, let me explore something different, and moved over into HR to lead our diversity and inclusion initiative, which has been great. As Senior Director of People, Culture, and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, I'm not only responsible for talent acquisition pertinent to today's discussion, but also have leadership responsibility for organization development, talent management, learning and development, HR metrics, communication and policy. So with that span of control, what a great way for us, for me to have influence in our global processes for diversity, equity, and inclusion, starting with our recruitment strategy. So excited to be here.
That's a big mandate, Alicia.
Yes, I'm up for the challenge.
All right, and over to Nita. Oh, Alicia, where are you? Sorry, before we forget.
Located in Phoenix, Arizona, which is the headquarters for Semiconductor.
Excellent. All right, over to Nita, who's also further west.
Hi, Romy. Thanks so much to Fairy Godboss for this event. Really, really glad to be here today. I'm Nita Hendrickson, and I'm calling in from my home here in San Diego, California. So welcome to my living room. And I work with Becton Dickinson in our biosciences organization. Becton Dickinson, or commonly known as BD, it has a little over 70,000 employees worldwide. And we are a global medical technology and life science company, and focused on advancing the world of health. And oftentimes, right now in particular, you would know us if you've received a vaccination recently. It's very likely that that's through a product that BD manufactures and produces. And we work in things like medical discovery, diagnostics, delivery of care. So at the end of everything we do, there is likely a patient. Thrilled to be here again with the biosciences part of BD, and coming to you from sunny San Diego today.
Nita, I did get my vaccination, my first dose on Monday. So thank you, because that was a really big day. All right, so I'm going to go back, and I'll go back the other way. And I have some scripted questions, just so the audience knows how this is going to go. I have some scripted questions that I'm going to ask this panel, but please feel free to drop questions in the Q&A, and I can either take them as we go or take them at the end. But we definitely want to take your questions. Recently at Fairy Godboss, we fielded a survey of practitioners like you all. And what we found was that 98% of the respondents said diversity recruiting was a priority this year, so that's good. But only 54% have specifically identified tangible goals. So the others are saying it's important, but we don't have numbers that we're trying to get to specifically. Where do you fall on that spectrum? And can you explain a little bit about why? And maybe give some advice to our audience about what they should do wherever they are on this journey. So Nita, I'll go back to you.
Sure. Thanks, Romy. Yes, at BD, we do have very specific goals. We measure with respect to talent attraction and hiring with regards to ethnic diversity, women, et cetera. But then we also measure and have goals related to promotions and advancement as well. And for us, excuse me, for us, it's important to have those measurements and understand our baseline so we can track our progress. And I think if I was to give advice or guidance to organizations that maybe haven't set goals yet, one of the things that I would advise is to think about diversity goals and metrics as not a one size fits all. So it needs to be very specifically customized to what's happening within your industry, what's happening within the work groups that you're looking to hire within. What you want to hire or what you want to track really should be about what you feel the needs are and where you need to add diversity. So customize it, make it something that's uniquely yours and something that you uniquely want to drive and have an impact in, would be my recommendation.
I love it. All right, Alicia, to you. Do you have diversity goals? And if so, how did you implement them? What advice do you have?
So just like Nita, we do have diversity goals. In 2018, we started measuring diverse new hires as one of our metrics, and that's looking at an employee at the new college graduate level all the way up to the C-suite. And similar, again, as what Nita mentioned, we look at promotions, we look at representation as well. And we also, in 2018, embedded our diversity goals tied to our corporate bonus plan, which helps drive accountability and alignment at the very tops of the organization to really make a change and move the needle in our numbers and metrics. My recommendation is to perhaps, if you have the resources, do historical collection of data to see where you've come from. That's where we started our journey. My engineer background kicked in and said we need to start with the data, and actually took it a little step further. Actually worked with the team, with our our data scientists and gurus in our forecasting group over in the logistics area to come up with a forecast model. We looked at turnover. We looked at hiring rates, we looked at promotions and overall representation as a starting point. But if you don't have, those resources or that capability, I would say maybe start monitoring today and just start with what you have today. It's very easy to go out and do some research on the internet, maybe in your industry specifically, to look at, maybe a CSR report, an annual report, maybe a diversity report for some of your peers or others in the industry to see where their data is, and maybe kind of give yourself a benchmark, monitor yourself, and then just take it from there will be my advice.
And Alicia, just a point of clarity, because I get this question a bunch of times. If you don't have the data collected, where are you going for? Are you using EOC data from employee applications, or are you doing an internal employee survey? How do you collect that data the first time if you don't have it?
Well, on Semiconductor, we actually utilize our HRIS department to help support us in that area. We actually participate in some diversity indexes, so we can share our data anonymously and get feedback from our data along with others, either in our industry or all industry, to do some comparative data. And that's there's several indexes out there that are free to participate in. So there's a couple of ways that we gather our data.
That's great. Thank you. All right, Nigel, over to you. So where are you and Moody's on this spectrum of goal setting for diversity?
No, absolutely. I mean, we've been tracking data and monitoring data and using that data internally for a number of years, because I think as both sort of Nisha and Alicia are mentioning, right, you've got to use the data first. You have to know where you are to see what sort of progress you're making. And very similarly, we look at that in terms of hires, in terms of promotions, and then also in terms of attrition and sort of turnover, as well as looking at all of those spheres in terms of representation, because we want to make sure we're focusing on gender and underrepresented groups as we look at that. In terms of actual goal setting, it's actually a very exciting time for Moody's. We are working through this now in terms of actually having external goals that we will be communicating out as things that we're really standing behind. We've had internal focus areas and things like that, but this is going to be our first time that we're doing that. So watch this space. Hopefully in a couple of weeks' time, we will actually have those. But it will be, I think it's goals people can very much relate to, which is increasing representation of women at senior levels, looking at some of our parts of the pipeline where we want to make sure we're bringing more women into the organization. And then as we're a global company in countries where we have more multicultural presence, we want to make sure we're focusing on underrepresented groups and also ensuring that we're bringing them into sort of the pipeline. So, and I think my advice is, it can seem very overwhelming, right? At the beginning, I can remember some smaller organizations and different companies I've worked for, and everyone wants to do this, but you have that question of how, and you've got to start somewhere. You've got to put that stake in the ground, even if it's just tracking a couple of things to begin with. Once you've then got that data, you can then start taking forms, because, I guess I'm competitive in my nature, but I want to, unless you're measuring something, you're never going to make progress, right? And I think it doesn't matter if that's, weight loss or a diet, or if it's, a recruiting plan, whatever it might be, you set those goals out and you decide this is how I'm going to work towards it. And sometimes you do well, sometimes you can see where you're falling back, but data is the key.
Yes.
We're fortunate to have a great analytics department that's way smarter than I am and can, really help us as we look at all of that.
Great, fantastic. All right, Margot, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say that SAP must be one of the very first companies that ever made a public diversity pledge.
Yes, we were the first company that were EDGE certified, so economic dividends for gender equality, in terms of the first technology company. And so we, back in 2013, set a goal of 25% women in leadership and management by 2017 globally. Globally, our numbers changed because we acquire a lot of companies along the way. We're currently 100,000 people globally. So for the North America region, which I'm responsible for setting strategies, 25,000. And we've increased our goals over the years to expand across other demographics and other diversity dimensions. So including ethnic, including veterans, disability. We have a signature autism at work program. So we have a number of different metrics that we do track. And as has been stated, that if you measure it and monitor it, but then also the partnership, I can't underscore the internal and external partnerships that are just key to the success of it. When you have your HR teams, practitioners working together, so us in D&I, along with talent attraction, along with employer branding, the hiring managers, the full set of everyone working together to say, here are the targets that make sense for our company, and then here's what makes sense for particular board areas or lines of businesses. You may already have enough women in like an HR department, but not so much in the engineering department or the sales team. So we are very strategic in what we set forth by our board areas and intentional to say, what do we do? How do we do it? But the advice would be tied to your organizational objectives and goals overall. So SAP, from a philosophy of even our software, we say we're helping the world run better and improving people's lives. So internally, we want to do that too, whether it's hiring, promoting, retaining, etc., tying it to your organizational goals. Having senior executive leadership, because if you don't have the buy-in at the top to funnel the messaging down, everyone won't be aligned with it. And then looking at how to operationalize those targets and the methodologies to make it happen on your respective team by those managers. Those are the key pieces, I would say, tying it to the organizational goals, having that senior leadership, tracking and monitoring, and then being specific, very prescriptive and intentional as it needs to be adopted through all of them. You already have hiring plans typically that you're getting budgeted headcount anyway, so leverage that to then infuse your diversity goals. We actually have a talent intelligence team, which is a part of our TA organization, that does a lot of heat mapping and analytics throughout the globe to help us see where it's actually feasible to attract the talent that we seek, whether it's gender-based or veteran-based or ethnic-based. So that's very key to our philosophy and the longevity of the goals and the things that we've been doing with it in the tech industry.
It's amazing. So sounds to me like, hearing from all of you, step one is measure, right? We have to know where we are today, and then we identify the areas where we need to make improvements. And often they're more high profile areas, either because those are the areas hiring most rapidly, or they're the ones that are the least diverse, or maybe sometimes both. So Alicia, I'm going to go back to you and ask you, how do you think about, you work in a what is, you are probably one of a handful of women engineers in this big world on semiconductor. How do you think about attracting more women and more women of color and other diverse populations to on semiconductor?
Yeah, so to start with the recruitment process at the university relations level is analyzing the schools in which we hire from. We actually have a tiered view of the schools that we participate with, and that based on resourcing and funding and engagement that we have with the different schools. So we need to evaluate the graduation rates and look at the demographics from looking at women that are graduating, people of color that are graduating, and see if it's in alignment with what we are looking as far as our hiring goals. So we do that evaluation of our schools every several years. Another way that we are looking at and engaging in increasing those numbers and impacting the candidate pipeline is also being a little bit more strategic and looking at, labor market data research and analytics. Again, this is tapping into the skill set of being able to analyze data and see based on skill set, the skill sets of the future, what we're looking to do, where we're looking to grow, where can we tap into that particular, knowledge and talent that we may need to expand beyond our typical locations that we've done in the past. I think the pandemic has changed that mindset for us in that we don't typically need to look at certain locations, certain schools. Where's the skill set today based on the labor market, and come up with a strategy for how we can go after recruitment based on what the data is showing us.
Great. Nigel, I'm going to ask you the same thing. You're obviously finance, technology, and I know that women in leadership is especially a focus for you. How do you think about attracting specifically in those types of roles?
Yeah, absolutely. I think pipeline is key. I mean, when you look at, financial services and tech companies and you look just purely at demographics, you are starting from a challenging point of view when you do want to influence gender and race in some of those cases. So we've been very purposeful with how we use our early career programs, whether it's like an internship program, whether it's like how we bring in our analysts, whether it's how we bring in like sort of our tech rotational program, and being very deliberate and purposeful to get people into the organization. Because, Moody's has great retention. We're very blessed in that regard. So once people come into the organization, they tend to stay, but people may not have heard of us, or they may not have thought of us as a true tech company, and as we're sort of pivoting more and doing more in fintech, it's really important that we are telling that story. We've really been quite purposeful over the last 18 months in making our footprint clearer. And what I mean by that is it's not just, we all want to move beyond the post and pray method of recruiting. That's not how you move the needle. But in strategic partnerships that we're forming with organizations like Fairy Godboss, Power to Fly, and Mogul, where we're very deliberately and intentionally, we have some regional, women-focused job boards and different partnerships that we work with. And we're forming that not just to sort of obviously share jobs and openings, but to share the storytelling aspects, who we are, thought leadership of other women leaders, career pathing, and holding events, which we call them insight events, where people get to come in and learn and understand what is the company like. And then as we're using those sort of goals, it really is helping us build up our pipeline in areas. So I think it has to be deliberate, it's intentional, and as you're building that pipeline, you're always sort of making sure, is this working towards the areas we want to influence? So for example, women in tech, women in finance. We held a great data science event for female technologists, and this was like an area we needed to influence. And by putting in that legwork, telling the story, highlighting some phenomenal women in our organization, we then get this drip feed information to people who suddenly start thinking about Moody's. And as we measure things like, would you have thought about Moody's before this event, and then measured after the fact, now that you've learned more, now you've met some of our employees, now you've met some of our leaders, would you be interested? And doing those things has really helped us start to build pipeline. We're not where we want to be. We're going to continue focusing on this. And I just think there's not a silver bullet to this, right? You've got to try lots of things and to make sure that you're going after those different verticals in different ways.
Right. So I think as talking to practitioners like all of you, the word of the year, or the two words of the year, are talent communities. And so Margot, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about how you think about building a talent community and nurturing that talent community and kind of directing it to help build diversity.
Sure. And the talent community concept really is about more than hitting up a population when you have a rec available, right? So we invite through open house. We had a huge diversity open house in November. We've had a couple of virtual HBCU summits. We've had women in tech events where we invite them to sign up to be part of our talent community, create job alerts so that we can see what is of interest to them and push some opportunities to them. But then also relationships with organizations like Women in Technology International, with Fairy Godboss, with National Sales Network. We try to go after different areas where we know we're looking to hire, and then host what Nigel just talked about a little bit ago, thought leadership sessions and things like that, where we can let them see us, we see the talent directly, our hiring managers, not just the recruiters, that we build those relationships with our employee network groups internally, let them mentor some of those folks and participate in coaching corners with them so that they can see SAP and SAP can see them. As much as we think we're known across the globe because we have 440,000 customers and 20,000 plus partners, I still encounter folks that go, SAP, what's that? And I'm like, hey, let's start there. Don't call it SAP. Clearly, we need you in our talent community so we can help, build this relationship and tell you more about what we do and how we do. So I think that that's the concept is really important, that there is no shortage of talent, but how do we go about attracting the talent? How do we nurture the talent, build the talent? How do we involve them invite them and involve them with what we're doing just in our community service outreach programs and such, so that they can get a better feel for if they want us, should we decide we want to invite them to apply for a role and participate in our process. So that's a piece that I think for years maybe companies kind of overlooked. And it is a challenge to a certain extent because generationally and culturally, society has not raised women to be the data scientist and engineer until more recently. So when you're looking for somebody who to be super experienced in it, it's not a whole lot of Alicia's who've been doing the engineering for a decent amount of time. There's not a whole lot of women in some of the spaces, or people of color in some of the spaces, before they were prohibited from being in it. So intentionally seeking out those internal and external partnerships where there are professional societies, talent agencies, schools at the collegiate level, master's programs. We work with GEM, which is National Consortium of Masters and PhDs in STEM, and they're male and female. They're all sexual orientation, some have veterans, but they're all people of color. Being very strategic, building those talent communities so they can understand better the opportunities that are out here and the cross section. Maybe they won't come to SAP, but if we can, even through the involvement with us, get them to our customer partner ecosystem, that's also a bonus of being in a talent community. So various aspects that you can take, and more opportunities open up for both the hiring employer as well as the talent when you build that talent community.
That sounds great, Margot. Nita, how about you? Are you engaging in the talent community approach?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much echoes what Margot is saying, and also quite a bit what Nigel is saying as well, which is establishing the connection to those communities before you have the open requisition, before you have the open role, and building that rich relationship. So being very targeted as to where you're reaching in, trying not to dilute and get to everywhere, right? You want to be quite intentional and focused, and offering those individuals that typically you perhaps maybe outside of your immediate network or your comfort zone, or perhaps you don't normally have exposure to, and richly building the relationship, getting to know that talent, sharing the talent within the hiring community. We do things like introduce talent, even if there's not an opportunity, to leaders within our organization so that we can continue to build that relationship. Much like what Alicia said, that with the university relations and them having a tier program and being very targeted about where they reach into, I think there's such a benefit to working and partnering with, whether it's organizations like Fairy Godboss, universities, other populations or communities, and giving something back. So offering either learning, learning programs, or even giving back to the community, so that those key talents and that diverse talent is seeing you not just as a company that with a title, but actually seeing the future opportunity that you might be able to provide for them. That's for us how we build the pipeline before we even need the pipeline to be activated.
Great. And I'm going to go back to you for the next question, which is, you all are highly committed to achieving your diversity hiring goals. And now, in order to succeed, you need to collaborate with hiring managers. So how do you collaborate? Nita, I'll start with you. How are you collaborating with hiring managers? And we actually had some questions that were coming along the way, which is, and how do you use data in part of that conversation to help create transparency for hiring managers? What are you doing to help make sure that they're fulfilling their end of the bargain?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is that the key there on the data, sharing the data with hiring managers so that they understand what our goals are, but where we land and what our metrics are, essentially making it clear to them. I think the other thing too is this concept of educating a hiring manager in a just-in-time fashion around consciously including conscious inclusion, removing bias from the hiring practice and processes, because bias kind of sneaks into nooks and crannies, and can be there, and surfacing for hiring managers ways in which we can fall into those traps. And so for us, we do a lot of education for our hiring managers. We utilize tools like Textio to help guide hiring managers on how to create a profile and a job profile that doesn't knock out or disqualify potential candidates. And also just challenging, even from an HR business partner aspect, challenging, I think there was a comment about, do you consider diversity of thought as diversity? And this construct of helping hiring managers and leaders understand what will be additive to your team versus the same. So additive meaning going after whether it's diversity of thought, diversity of color, diversity of gender, veteran status, LGBTQ+, all of those things that can offer something that is different. That conversation with the hiring manager so that it's intentional and thoughtful, and then also encouraging diverse slates for interview panels as well. We require that, we measure that, not only diverse slates for our candidates, but we measure diverse panels for interview panels as well. And we share that data back to our hiring managers too, which I think always surfaces, it just keeps it at the forefront versus an afterthought.
Yes, 100%. Nigel, did you want to add anything about how you're collaborating with hiring managers?
An awful lot of commonality between what sort of Nita mentioned. I mean, we were very fortunate in terms of, from our leadership down, our CEO, Rob Fauber, our whole executive leadership team are very committed to this, and it's a top focus area. So we're lucky we have that support, because it's got to be important throughout the organization to resonate with everyone. In terms of what we've also did is we reframed our whole global talent acquisition process. We rolled out a whole new process last June. And rather than making D&I sort of like an add-on or an afterthought, as we were restructuring the whole process, we wove proven, because there's so much great data out there, Harvard Business Review, we weaved in D&I best practices into every aspect of the TA. And Nita mentioned a lot of those, like slates, panels, having consistent rating scales, using structured interview processes. One thing we do at Moody's, which I think is really to speak to the diversity of thought part, is when we do our debrief meetings, we have the most junior person speak first, so that everyone gets to hear their thoughts. The decision maker speaks last, so that we're really getting that, and everyone comes in, talking about the feedback and all these things that are just woven into the process. So it's not like, oh, I have to remember another thing. This is just the Moody's way of doing it. And then supporting people with training. Over the last year, we've developed 3 short e-trainings to the point of being just in time. So for members of the interview panel, for the hiring managers, and then we have a whole one on sort of behavioral-based interviewing, which again focuses on those best practices. So we're eliminating bias and you're having a consistent experience for people. So, and one thing which has really helped, we reframed recruiting as a HR function, and really now we talk about talent acquisition as something that's business led and TA enabled. So we're here to do the heavy lifting, we're here to support you, but this is a business imperative. It's part of the intake kickoff meeting. What are your diversity goals for this position? What are we working for this position? And we keep focused on that the whole way through. And by hearing diverse voices throughout the process and ensuring we have diverse candidates in the process, we hope by doing that it's just going to keep moving the needle. So.
Nigel, I really like what you said about making sure that it is a core part of your process, so nobody's kind of like getting to the end and forgetting, or you're retrofitting. It's fundamental.
Yeah, it's just woven into everything we do. We work very closely with our chief diversity and inclusion officer, when we said this is the framework that we're putting together. Here's the point of intersection. And I think that has, and also then meant as we were rolling it out, we had that other layer of support, another person that said, this is the right way of going about it. So.
Great. Margot, did you want to add something on this?
Yeah, it's very similar. When I talk about making DNR DNA, again, repeating some of what was said around foundational partnership with TA, with DNI, we have specific tools to enable with. So they have a My Teams dashboard that speaks directly to the managers, team compositions, etc. We have Business Beyond Bias, which helps with the job descriptions and making those more inclusive. We have manager toolkits, DNI toolkits, that talk about the best way to diversify their interview panels, as well as that they're the end customer of TA, so that their slates that they're seeking, that they can certainly get that when they're requesting it, and that they're not feeling a wreck until they reach that point of being able to show the representation that the metrics have been set around. So just very intentional enablement. I love that the diverse slates and such are talked about, but how do we operationalize that? What do we do with the toolkit? Don't just put it out there, let's use it. Being very prescriptive around the intersectionality, because diversity of thought is important. But that partnership with the hiring managers, one thing I will add is that we involve them in our hiring events, so that it's not just the recruiters that are seeing the talent, but the managers are getting to see the talent firsthand. So whether we're on site in the past or virtual, we invite them to be part of those events so that they can see the talent, because sometimes recruiters may make decisions on behalf of the hiring managers that the hiring manager may have made slightly different had they vetted the talent firsthand. So I think that's really important. If you have the bandwidth, if your organization has the bandwidth to involve the hiring managers or someone on their immediate team in that process with TA and DNI, that is something that's really very beneficial and very helpful to do. And they lastly created a TA best run interviews where they involved SAP's DNI teams to influence what those questions look like and ranking them. So no more of this thumbs up, thumbs down, but what's the methodical numerical ranking system of the candidates that have come through, and only those with the highest scores move through to that next level. Rubrics and assessment based, not just traditional questions, right, is what's been the big change for us over recent years.
I love that. And Margot, for me, what I love hearing about is how you involve the hiring managers in the recruiting events, because I think it just creates so much more accountability. They're understanding end-to-end what's happening and helping fulfill the outcomes.
Yeah.
It's great.
And they like it, and to the point of what Nigel just said, TA enabled, but leader led. The managers like it, but also the talent that you're seeking, they want to speak directly to those in the field doing the work. So not that they don't want to talk to TA, but they have questions that sometimes only those doing the work can answer. So it's a better experience for everyone.
Heavy or specialized skills, for sure. For sure. We're getting a lot of questions. I'm going to deviate for a second because we're getting a lot of questions from the audience, and I know these come up a lot about very brass tacks. If anyone wants to comment on what systems you use, Margot, sounds like you have a homegrown system, but others, maybe what ATSs you use, or Margot, you may want to talk about success factors. And then how do you ensure and monitor for a diverse slate? How do you ensure and monitor for a diverse panel?
I mean, I can start with some of ours. It is our SAP tools. We have an SAP Cloud Analytics that we monitor our diversity dashboard on. We have the success factors tools around Business Beyond Bias and things like that. When it comes to the candidate slates, think about who's setting up your interviews for you, right? They're already setting it up. You already know that they're going to meet with this person, this person, this person, whether it's a panel or successive interviews. And so you have to be very intentional to say, okay, do we have cross-functional representation from this board area or line of business and this line of business, because these teams intersect and that's who you want them to meet with. They're a salesperson you're hiring, so please bring somebody from finance on the panel. Make sure they're not going to give away the house at compensation time, right? Like things like that. You want to make sure you have gender representation. If you don't have it on the team that you're hiring in, look at another team that you interface with. Leverage your ERGs, your ENGs, to invite somebody from your Business Women's Network or your Black Employee Network, something like that. So those are ways you can directly measure, okay, we had this candidate meet with 5 people, and of the 5 people, here's who they were. If they were all any one demographic, that's not inclusive. So it has to be a mix of what is going to be the best talent to do the interviews, but with a strategic focus on gender representation, ethnic representation, and background and experience. I'm at SAP 14 years this year, but I'm not a career HR person. I'm a CPA Six Sigma Green Belt turned certified diversity executive. So when they hired me in 2007 to run finance teams, that's not what I'm doing right now. And so I'm leveraging that finance experience and such. You want to look at your talent for the long haul and what you can do. So measure based on what you already are planning and checking off who's doing what, and then utilizing tools and data will increase adaptability to doing it because it's no longer anecdotal, right? And there are a lot of external and internal tools, even your AI tools. We use a couple of third-party resources on the front end to first source and vet and analyze the applicants that way too.
Great. Nita, did you have something to add there about the tools, systems, process?
Well, it's a little bit related to the process and kind of the essence of culture. And one thing that popped into my head as Margot was talking is to not underestimate the value and the power of the recruiter to have an impact and influence those hiring panels, and building a culture where the recruiter or the talent attraction individual or team member can actually say, hey, I noticed that you don't have a diverse panel. Let's reach across the organization to so-and-so. They don't know, they're not an engineer, but this will make a difference to the candidates when they come in and they see or hear the perspective that's diverse. And so I think being sure to enable and empower your talent attraction team members so that they really can speak up and drive that as well. It's not a tool, but it's utilizing them as a channel to further influence and surface other options on the hiring panel.
Yes. And Nita, somebody asked if there aren't diverse representatives in that particular hiring line, should you be transparent? And I think your answer would be a resounding yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it's always better to say, hey, we have some work to do than to pretend that you don't.
Absolutely.
And I could add to that too, that question or that concern. Think a little differently too, in that you don't have to have the interview panel be just from that team. I mean, you can source from a huge amount of employees across the company to be a part of the interview team. And what a way to have an inclusive voice by having an opportunity for maybe a junior level female from another department come in and sit in on the interview team, just to give a different perspective. And we've actually tested that out and done cases in that, and it actually tweaked the mindset of the hiring manager a bit to say, you know what, I haven't even thought about that perspective or that insight when it comes to talent. Because sometimes with hiring managers, unfortunately, they come into the hiring process with an already set, maybe even the actual hire they want to make, right? Or, a school that they want to go to. So how do we empower the recruiter to allow drive the hiring manager to think a little differently? So those opportunities, having that dialogue and again, empowering the hiring manager, or the recruiter for the hiring manager to consider things differently is very important. And I will also say recently for us, in looking at the labor market analytics, because another kind of bias is that there isn't the talent in this particular space, or we don't have that availability. Well, actually, market analysis shows that. Have you considered this, talent in this area, or considered that? When you show the data, it's been refreshing for hiring managers to be like, okay, let me consider that. So it's changing perspective. So really, you have to be intentional about it, and you have to be very persuasive. So that's the thing about our recruiters. You have to make sure that they're continually going at it to kind of challenge a little bit where they can. So, and we're providing the platform for them to do that.
And if I could show a question that's here that's related in the chat, and so your recruiters, but also your HRBPs, the partner, but someone just said, what if you try to have a diverse pool of candidates, but people who apply for your job are part of two cultures only? What can you do to add diversity? inviting other groups and reaching out to other groups, because sometimes we as companies wait and see who applies, and then that's all who we consider. But use job boards at Fairy Godboss, at other institutions, at collegiate levels, at professional societies. National Association of Female Executives used to be a big group that did a lot of things that you could reach out to. There are so many professional societies, there are HR societies, engineer societies, women in every sort of category, as well as people of color. We partner with National Business Disability Council. They're around women, men, and with disabilities. So if you leverage job boards and or partner relationships to invite the population that you're seeking, that is an addition to the people who are already applying, who might be more homogeneous in their demographics. So that's a way of doing that. And look for that. Someone said additive earlier. Don't always seek for a culture fit, a culture add, right? What's a positive disruption that can bring that in diversity to your workplace and inclusion to your philosophy? Most businesses are inherently diverse because you're across a bunch of across the globe, etc. Right? But what's the inclusion scale look like? What's the engagement? What does the leadership trust look like? All of those are influenced by the behaviors that are embedded in what we're discussing today. So not just your hiring cycle.
And I also think, to add on to what Margot was saying, it's great to get what comes in. It's then great to be deliberate and going out to different things, but sourcing directly yourself, particularly for very in-demand talent, and where there is, it's a competitive area, there's a labor shortage, and then particularly when you want to instill diversity, there are some great tools out there, organizations, companies like Seek Out, and different aspects of things you can do with LinkedIn through using certain filters around HBCUs or institutions that serve the Hispanic community. I mean, there are certain things you can do through your LinkedIn recruiter license if you have that, to be, again, and I love that this word's used so much, but being intentional and deliberate, so that we challenge our recruiters, see what comes in when we post the jobs, see what we get through referrals, see what we get for our business resource groups referring. But if you're still not seeing the diversity you would feel comfortable in as we're building that slate, how are we going to get it? We're going to be building out a sourcing layer to help us with that. And again, it's something you've just got to be, it's not just going to come to you, particularly in some of these niche skills. And I'm sure we could all talk about our own industries, but what is that really tough job we're all struggling for? And you've got to have, it's not one size fits all.
100%. And I want to add, I think it's not just about where, it's about how are you messaging. And that is one of the key things we've learned as we've tried to understand what influences women job seekers over the last 5 years. The job descriptions are not going to pull in women job seekers. It's about narratives. It's about storytelling. It's about culture and bringing that to life, helping a potential applicant say, there are people like me here. This is a place I will belong, I will fit in. Alicia, did you want to talk a little bit about the work you're doing in that way?
Yeah, so we're looking at really, as we're going through, a big culture shift right here at the company, which is good and exciting to see. We had a new CEO that came in December and has some fresh new ideas of what we can do to look at things differently here at the company. So I think a starting place, just one item I'll just mention, is just our website, just opportunity to look there and see how we can really engage. And again, it goes to what you just mentioned, the storytelling, right? How we share our story, share our brand, what we're about, and what we're looking to do for the future. And let our website be a tool to help, share that with the world. So we're working on that as an initiative. And another piece as part of our brand, or a thing for me personally, what I'm passionate about is coming from the engineering space, is our language, inclusion, and talking inclusive language, and having the inclusive visuals across the company, and sharing our brand. A big technical part right now for us in our language is non-inclusive terminology. How do we address that? So, and I think that helps sell the stories when you show that we understand that we have history, coming from a technology company, have a historical identification of use of master slave in some of our product documentation. Understand is there. We know as a company that this is not where we want to, just sit and stand, we plan to address it, and we want to address it as an industry. So, but publicly sharing that type of face, I think, helps share that as a culture, we want to share our story of inclusion and show that we're doing the things to really impact diversity, equity, and inclusion overall.
Love it. All right. I have one more question here from the audience. Let's see. Which is and it's such an important question. We are talking a lot about attracting talent, but once they're in, how do you, any thoughts on retaining? How do you retain the talent?
I'd love to answer that if I could at least start with it. You want to be just as intentional and intersectional in your retention strategies as you are with your hiring strategies. So we have catalyst programs, Women to Watch. We have our high potential top talent programs. We enable employees to participate in external learning and leadership events. We pay for people to participate in Management Leadership of Tomorrow and McKinsey, Unlocking the Potential of Women, and McKinsey Black Accelerator Leadership Program. We pay for that as a company to say, yes, we have our own TLL internally and programs we run internally, but we do have things externally that people are allowed to participate in, encouraged to participate in, to build their skill set. We have things like tuition reimbursement in parts that are part of the normal benefits package, but then we have surveys and engagement opportunities throughout the year, because we know that most people look for other things besides their core job to participate in the company to stay there. So offering opportunities for CSR ambassadorships or corporate social responsibility, spotlight on Black businesses and women-owned businesses, and things that we do month over month to make sure that we're involving our employees and what the full community of SAP is about, not just your core job. Mentorship, sponsorship, all those types of enablements for the employees who are here make a difference. Rich benefits like, RSUs and compensation are important as well, yet we look at things like fitness programs and competitions with our Fitbit tracker and cancer screenings, things that are kind of that additive, pet insurance, legal assistance. We offer those additional things that we say, look, we see you, we feel you, we know the whole person that you bring to the workplace. We had a Free to Be Me at SAP survey that says, let's do this engagement pulse check. What matters to you? Do you want to showcase some of the things about yourself that aren't a part of your traditional job? Let's have these pass the mic sessions, right? So just different ways to recognize that there's more to the person than the job that you do. And those are ways to recognize it, whether that's our paternity campaign, Dads and Donuts, or that's our maternity campaign, all those things. If caregiver, you may not have children of your own, but what can we do to enable you and host you as part of the SAP family year round once you are here? And again, I'm here 14 years, 5 different roles. So knowing that I can reinvent myself 100 times and still stay here without having to hop companies as I did my first 15 years of my career, it's very encouraging, rewarding. So those are things you can do for retention.
That's great. Thank you, Margot. All right, I'm going to go to our last question for each of the panelists. Lightning round. Nita, what is the most important thing you think our audience should know to achieve diversity hiring goals this year, or know, take away?
Yeah, I think it's super important to remember that diversity recruitment it's not hiring to meet quotas. It's not lowering the hiring standards. It's not bypassing relevant skills needed for a role. What it is, and many have referenced this, is inviting qualified talent to opportunities that they may not know of or maybe perhaps shy away from. Finding qualified talent outside of your immediate network and comfort zone, and making decisions based upon qualifications, not on favoritism or bias. Full stop.
Love it. Nigel, over to you.
I think we've used this word before, you have to be intentional, and you have to sort of be laser focused on this. There isn't one size fits all. I often talk about this as like a tapestry approach, because you're going to try something for early careers, you're going to try something for your tech persona. Whatever it is, those areas, you have to say, what is the problem we're trying to solve, and how are we going to do, because you can't do everything, 1 or 2 things to address talent in that area, and then measure. because you'll find out if that was a great feel-good event, but you got no good results, or if you're able to sort of build a pipeline, get some success, and build on it. So be deliberate, have a plan, know what you're focusing on, and measure it.
Fantastic. Alicia, parting thought. What should everyone take away?
Parting thought takeaway for me is just start. Start with the data, start with, the gaps identified, and just utilize that as the platform to begin your work. And also seek support from the top, because if you don't have that alignment or those advocates from the top to really push forward, you're going to have roadblocks. So seek that out and utilize those advocates, that leadership at the top, to be the face of your work and help be a voice for your work.
I love it. Margot, what should everyone do right now when they get off this call?
Look at your leadership principles and tie your goals and metrics to that, right? Remove systemic barriers in your process. That in and of itself will enable the metrics to come. It's not about equality, equity, it's the removal of systemic barriers. Go look at your data, understand your data, your X and O data, quantitative and qualitative, and then tie it to your organizational leadership goals and principles. And as was already stated, get started.
Fantastic. This has been such a wonderful conversation. Clearly, we all need to get our data in order. We need to work with leadership, with hiring managers. We need to be transparent, and we need to get started. So thank you all very much for your time and for joining us. I know there are so many questions. I would love to have you all visit us on Fairy Godboss and be part of our community. And thank you so much for your time. Great having you all. Bye.
Thanks for having us. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Romy.